democracy now. I'm going to write a book about my non-adherences on democracy now. One of them, I was all the way in the Port Authority and was walking down there and got the call. So that was a good one, though, because, I was knocked off by the Chicago door and windows, the Republic door and windows strike. If Juan Gonzalez did. I was like, my God, I'm from Chicago. I'll talk to you about that. But you don't know what, this is an inside conversation. They got to know what's going on. A lot of the members of the so-called professional left don't. I want to give a quote, not to overly toot my horn of clairvoyance here. I want to give a quote from my '08 book, Barack Obama. I have one of them here, by the way, Barack Obama and the Future of American Politics. By the time this volume hits the bookshelves, I wrote in '08. And this book was done pretty much by June '08, the original Obama book I did. Its portrayal of Obama as a conservative, capitalism, corporate-friendly, racially conciliatory, empire-friendly centrist will strike many readers as counterintuitive because the nation's still potent right-wing attack machine will already be regularly assailing Obama as a far-left candidate, a socialist, a black nationalist, a dangerous anti-American enemy of God, country, family, and apple pie. Obama will be subjected to no small measure of ugly racial bigotry. And I go on like that. So I'm telling readers, some of you are going to have a hard time processing reality of celebrity because Glenn Beck and Sean Hannity and Rush Limbaugh are going to be calling this guy a... I love this. They would just call him a socialist, call him a Marxist, and sometimes call him a Marxist-Leninist. I keep waiting for them to get attuned to yet finer and smaller distinctions. In the history of the left, they're calling him a Bukharinist or a Trotskyist or a shining path Maoist or an anarcho-syndicalist. I guess if he's a Marxist, Dennis Kucinich is like a Paracon anarcho-syndicalist or something like that. Well, here we are. Look at 2 years later, the reality of the Obama administration is told in the chapter titles of this book. The intro is titled The Rebranding. Chapter 1 is titled Business Rule as Usual. And it dissects the president's service to the moneyed elite, betrayal of ordinary poor people. Left to ask, where's our bailout? Chapter 2 is titled Empire's New Clothes, Words and Deeds in Obama's Foreign Policy. It looks at the 2009 Nobel Peace Prize winners' increase of imperial violence in South Asia, in expanding imperial terror war into Somalia, Yemen, Ethiopia, in sustaining occupation of Iraq, aiding and abetting Israel's criminal policies, furthering imperial pressure on Cuba, Iran, Russia, Latin America, aiding and abetting a right-wing coup in Honduras, a murderous coup, by the way. Hundreds of activists have been killed down there. In disguising escalated occupation as humanitarian relief in Hawaii, in the advanced kill of popular hopes for a peace dividend in passing a record-setting Pentagon budget that would shake Dr. Martin Luther King to his moral core. Chapter 3 is titled Corporate Managed Health Reform. I suppose the thesis of that chapter is pretty clear in the title. Chapter 4 is titled The Myth of the Post-Racial Presidency. It details Obama's militant commitment to a kind of nauseating sort of neoliberal post-civil rights race neutralism that may actually insidiously deepen institutional white supremacy in this country. It also documents continuation of the federal assault on immigrant workers and its very weak positions on gay rights and women's rights, and its interesting exploitation of identity politics in the process of making conservative Wall Street-friendly appointments to the Supreme Court. Chapter 5, which is deeply beholden to, I'm outside my expertise area in this chapter, so it's deeply reliant on the writings of people like Glenn Greenwald, is simply titled Big Brother Lives. And it tells shocking tales of how Obama has sustained the terrorist, anti-terrorism, and police state policies of Bush beneath deceptive repackaging. So all this stuff going on, all this stuff we know about, all this stuff that's not new, the old-time lefties know about, which I think so-called kids, millennials, needed to learn about through direct experience. And we have seen the Republican right, partly repackaged as the Tea Party, absurdly, insistently calling Barack Obama a socialist, black nationalist, leftist, radical, Marxist, Leninist, Maoist, Bukharinist, anarcho-syndicalist. No, they're not saying that. And this is a common sentiment on the right-wing communications empire. But it's not just Fox News. It is given no small degree of credence, this notion of Obama as some kind of lefty, in the more centrist mainstream corporate mass media, which continues against evidence to describe the president as, quote, a man of the left, a center-left president. That media, the mass media, continues absurdly to lecture him. This is a very interesting thing I tracked during his first couple of years in office. The recurrent lectures on his need to steer to the center as if he wasn't already a centrist, and to retain his, quote, pragmatic distance from, quote, ideology, meaning, of course, left ideology, and to scale back his supposed faith in gigantic, big government and deficits. And of course, these are lectures that the corporate media reserves and that the right reserves for Democratic presidents. They gave them to Bill Clinton, too. We all know Bill Clinton's announced the end of big government and slashed deficits and so on and so forth. It's a lecture the corporate media reserves for Democratic presidents, never gives to Republican presidents who grow deficits and big government with extreme ideological commitment to plutocratic tax cuts and messianic militarism and mass federal and state level incarcerationism and corporate welfare and state repression. Thanks to all this kind of reality distorting madness, we have this echo chamber on the Looney Tunes right, the paranoid style right, which, by the way, is now in power and has a voice like no time since the 1950s. And actually, Sean Wilentz had a piece in New Yorker a while back that Glenn Beck draws intellectual inspiration from a leading founding mind of the John Birch Society, a guy named Welch. It's an interesting piece by Wilentz. So thanks to all this reality distorting madness, which starts and spins on the Looney Tunes right, but gets picked up and reinforced in the mainstream media. By last spring, 55% of the American people thought that Barack, state capitalist, Wall Street bailout kingpin Obama could be accurately described as a socialist. Of course, no one knows what a socialist actually means. There's a pervasive sense among liberal supporters of Obama that he's been a disappointment as a president, that he failed to fulfill his campaign promises. I think I got to be careful with that. I do think Obama has failed to fulfill most of his carefully qualified and hedged. If you look at his 07, 08 campaign speeches, there are always qualifications there. Progressive promises to working people, labor, poor, immigrants, anti-war voters. Oh my God, did I see that in Iowa City? Really, in an intense kind of way. More than Chomsky seems to understand in a few things he's written. There really was an attempt to tell anti-war campus town types that this was your anti-war candidate. I do think he has failed to fulfill a lot of those promises that he made to those people, you know, on Monday and Wednesday morning. But the problem with this disappointment narrative is that it fails to see that Obama has in fact kept the less advertised promises he made to the rich and powerful, to the masters of profit and empire, on Monday and Wednesday evening, and all of Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Now, I documented this latter set of promises, the ones made to the power at length in my 2008 book, Barack Obama, Future American Politics, and I reprise a bunch of them in the 6th chapter of this book, The Empire's New Clothes, and that 6th chapter is titled We Were Warned. I think people who didn't have time and energy to do the due diligence research on candidate Obama do have good excuses for being disappointed in his record as president. I mean, the Obama branding, marketing machine worked. I saw it up close and personal. They're absolutely, stunningly brilliant. They had all kinds of money and they knew what to do with it too. The niche marketing was astonishing. I saw it up close and personal at the Johnson County Democratic Party headquarters in 2008. The Obama machine worked very hard to get people who aren't crazy like me, who sit around and dissect every speech by candidates. Most people don't do that because they don't want to be crazy like me. They want to be happy. They worked very hard to sell ordinary people an image of Obama as some kind of progressive activist fighting for change. The recurrent theme in the Iowa ads was community activist, community activist, community. Nothing about Harvard Law. Nothing about the deal he cut with the Federalist Society while he was at Harvard Law, or his first, working for Tony Orozco. Just rank and file community activists. Privileged middle class intellectuals and activists who did have the time, I shouldn't say about activists, they don't have time for anything, but intellectuals who have time and energy to peel behind the candidate mask and the imagery, I think have less excuse for buying into all the hopeful hope and change rhetoric about Obama. I think the deeply conservative reality of Obama's commitment to existing hierarchies and doctrines was pretty available to those who bought